But now all of a sudden, just because you're married and you have Fatima every single night in halal, you can forget about it and you think your son Ahmed, he's not hungry, he's not roasting, that he's not going through a fitan all day long.
Ugh, brother, ugh. What's that?
MashaAllah, brother.
Assalamu alaikum, welcome back to my channel. My name is Raiz. If you're new to the channel, please consider a subscribe and ring that notification bell so that you can keep up with my regular uploads. Also, if you want to support this channel even further, please check out the links in the description. So in today's video, I will be reacting to a segment in a video done by the channel Faiyad Fit, where Brother Faiyad discusses Zina and the issue of Muslim parents sending young people into university. I'm sure for many of the older folk, they can relate to the fact that university is a bubbling time, a time for, well, of course, getting down to studies and working hard and focusing on, a career, a future. But also people take it as a time for partying and getting to express oneself out into the wider world, but it does come with its negatives, and one of those negatives being sexual dynamic, zina, especially when we are talking about Muslims and perhaps a conservative outlook on life. These things could be challenging, so let's react.
Listen, your kid's 17, 18, 19, finally going to university, and they are at their sexual prime. Do you really think just telling them to be a good boy or a good girl and just focus on school and hit the books, that they're not going to have this innate predisposition to want love, companionship, intimacy? Do you really think it works that way? Like, uncle, you used to.
Look, we know this is true when it comes to kids starting, initiating the um, sexual development. I mean, this kind of comes around at like, 7, 8, 9, 10. You already see uh, small parts of this showing in, childhood development. And then it really hits its peak, I think, around, teens, adolescence, even your early 20s. And I mean, this is a group of people that are young, curious, fit, witty. They are just wanting to know more about life. They want to explore and so on and so forth. And so, within an environment like an academic institution, places where they are interacting with the same group of people who is also young, attractive, full of life, flamboyant, and so on and so forth. Um, it kind of gets challenging, especially for one who comes out of a conservative household, conservative background, who perhaps want to perhaps lower their gaze, who wants to be conservative in that sense to avoid this type of fitna, this type of trial, engaging with the opposite sex, out of fear of moving out of halal and so on and so forth. So um, this can be an issue.
Like, uncle, you used to be 19, 18, 17 once upon a time too. Come on now. You know what it felt like to be surrounded by fitna all day. But now all of a sudden, just because you're married and you have Fatima every single night in halal, you can forget about it and you think your son Ahmed, he's not hungry, he's not roasting, that he's not going through a fitan all day long.
Yeah, from what I understand, I think older people, parents, I think they stepped out of the shoe a long time ago, and perhaps they don't really understand, or they've forgotten what it was like growing up, or being that age and in that type of time of their lives, right? I'd even argue that it was a different time in of itself. I mean, uh, to compare the types of, let's say, imagery that we are seeing today compared to back then, the internet alone um, does so many things to the human mind. The technology that's available today, um, and what it's doing to the kids, what it's doing to the young people is perhaps not the best, when it comes to hypersexualizing a society and so on. And I don't think there was any of that back in the day.
Now, anyway, the Western academic educational system itself just runs on free mixing. It's a mixed environment since the time we are in kindergarten, 4, 5, 6 years old, all the way up until we finish and graduate and get our degrees. When I first immigrated to the West from Bangladesh, because I was born back home, and I came here, I was very uncomfortable initially with this whole mixed environment. They made us hug girls in school, play with them, wrestle with them, run around, play freeze tag with them. This was very odd to me. By the time I was in undergrad university, it was very weird when they noticed that you didn't want to unnecessarily interact with women. And this is because non Muslims simply don't understand free mixing. It was even weirder in medical school. because there were times where I would tell my professors that I don't want to be paired up with a female for labs and stuff because sometimes you got to touch them and there's physical contact, medical diagnosis, doing mock patient things, and I didn't want to be a part of that. And they would look at me like some barbaric Stone Age dinosaur. Now, what do you think happens when you put your daughter or son in these institutions? Even if let's say they're in correct hijab, you're still putting them around free mixing and men, non-mahram men, and you can't trust them at the end of the day. They're not operating under Sharia. Even Muslim men, you cannot trust them. Oftentimes,
So just touching base back on the parent issue, where perhaps we were saying, like I was saying, that parents are not aware of what the trials are of today in terms of this aspect. Free mixing, sexual dynamics between men and women, or girls and boys, young people. Um, we must note that parents, especially immigrant parents, live, like I said, in a different world, or a different time and a different world. Uh, when I say world, I mean the fact that they've come from perhaps more conservative societies, the East, the Muslim world, let's say, um, where these Western value systems have not is not practiced over there, and it's a different time as well, which makes their growing up completely different to their kids. Um, and so they just perhaps don't know what it is about in the current schooling system. I mean, from primary school, high school, university, the interaction between um, males and females is very rampant. It's a free to go type of thing, you know. And as the brother there has mentioned, that there's both physical and non-physical contact between um, girls and boys, which kind of makes it uncomfortable if it is that, like I mentioned earlier on, that you come out of a conservative background. The next thing I wanted to point out was that, unfortunately, within the West, it is imposed on you almost that you adopt this type of lifestyle, this type of idea where it's okay to touch your fellow colleague, or a student um, who happens to be of the opposite gender. And I mean, even as young males, as Muslim young males, you have this type of haya, this type of shyness, where it's just innately, naturally uncomfortable. And I mean, for girls, it should be like perhaps 10 times more so. Um, but yet the institution, the system, kind of like enforces it, and uh, gives you the impression that this is just normal, and it's good to go. I'd even touch on the fact that a healthy society, societies perhaps in the past, um, the old world, the in ancient civilization, you wouldn't have this type of free mixing, even as uh, young kids. I mean, if you understand the fact that the lifespans of people back then were probably not as long as it is today, you could get the idea that development had to you know be in effect much earlier. Um, for things to take place. I mean, we would get the understanding that even kids as young as 12, 13, 14 would be getting married and having kids and so on and so forth, which was pretty normal back then. It's only today where we see things completely different. Our lives have become so much easier and comforting, where we just have time to waste and time to uh, just do useless things, instead of getting down to actually uh, doing what is important in life. And reproduction is important, in terms of uh, moving on your offspring and so forth. But I'm drifting though, but I'm sure you get the point. In any case, that just shows that human beings are built to produce to reproduce at early ages. And the way the system is set up in today's society just does not go hand in hand with the with human nature. And so, look, I think the obvious solution is marriage, right? And you'd think to yourself, but look, uh, for the most part, my kids need to get an education so that they can get a job and sustain themselves, so that they can get married. But I would say that marriage would be a more should be on the priority list, more so than, in fact, the career, the job that's at the end of the academic journey. Uh, for the simple reason that it would protect them from zina. Right? Zina is obviously, as we know, um, one of the major sins which is pretty easy to fall into if it is you around this age, and you are just bombarded with imagery, you're bombarded with men and women, and all these types of temptations that are around you, and the culture that's within these societies, within academic society. Young people partying it out and being like free to go and so on and so forth. So it is kind of challenging. I'd say get down to marriage, make marriage easy, make it simple. And of course, the culture also promotes that we make marriage such a difficult and strenuous process. We've adopted what how Westerners see marriage to be and their weddings to be, which kind of put things back for us, because at the same time, young people are not really that wealthy. They would need their parents' help and so on. But again, their parents are the ones who's like, you know what, finish your career, your academic career first, and then you can move on to your job, your career, your actual career. This is the typical progression in terms of that. But yeah, I tend to disagree very much so. The earlier the marriage, the better. Um, it should work out in that sense. And I don't think young people would be then missing out on anything. You have, as blunt as it sounds, you have your sexual outlet, and then also you have companionship. You have, the partnership that you'd be looking for in any case out there in the university setting or the schooling setting. And you're not hopping around from one person to the other. Marriage is more constructive, it's more binding. There's responsibilities that are placed upon both individuals. And I think maybe it can cater up to the type of, the space in which these young people are in. I mean, for instance, a man wouldn't really have a job at that point in time, nor would a woman be really bound to the house at that point. So, you know, um, you can play around with these roles, I think. But in essence, you are still protected within the marriage framework, and you are not out there bouncing from one person to the other, as the typical Westerner does in terms of girlfriend, boyfriend, or even less than that. Friends with benefits and all these types of degenerate types of relationships.